So let's talk about the chip war today. Now, between the US and China, both sides they want to win this battle on the tech frontier. Consider what happened over the last 2 years. Biden slapped China with a litany of tax sanctions, and the most brutal of which are the semiconductor punishments. Now, the end goal is always simple. Let's starve China away from cutting edge chips from US companies like Nvidia, and let's hope their tech sector collapses. Now, before Biden left office, he hammered the world with a big round of chip restrictions. His final round of sanctions divided the world across US allies and the others. And if you are one of the rest, there's a limit to how many AI chips you can import from the US. Now, the key is to limit computing power to the world to give the G7 countries a head start in the AI race. So, nations everywhere were divided into different tiers. Now, China, of course, was placed into tier 3. They were only allowed to import the weakest US semiconductors in limited quantities, and the plan was to ensure China doesn't build advanced AI models and supersedes the US. Other countries weren't allowed to export to China as well, and that's why they were thrown into tier 2. The US is desperate to contain the Chinese economy through technology sanctions. But what have we seen over the last 3 months? China created AI model after model that simply blew the competition out of the water. DeepSeek destroyed ChatGPT, especially when it came to cost. It was at least 5 times cheaper. A month later, Menace AI from another Chinese company was launched, and that disrupted the industry again. And here's the crazy thing, China didn't use the most advanced chips now. It took them less than $10 million and a team of engineers from a hedge fund to flip the table on US tech companies. And just listen to Kai-Fu Lee, a Taiwanese leader in technology and computer scientists. He just reviewed the failure of the semiconductor sanctions.
And it's become clear that open source will be the winner. There's still many that will not concede, right? OpenAI, Anthropic, who build their businesses believing they can build a better closed model than everyone else. I think they got shocked when they saw a model as good. If you think about OpenAI's cost of $7 billion of operating costs in 2024, DeepSeek probably operated with 2% the operating expense. So the issue really isn't whose model is 1% better. I think they're all very good. But the issue is OpenAI's model even sustainable? I mean, you're spending $7 billion a year, making a massive loss, and here you have a competitor coming in with an open source model that's for free. And that company also is infinitely lasting because this founder has enough money to fund it at the current level and has reduced the cost of computing by a factor of 5 to 10. So with that kind of formidable competitor, I think Sam Altman is probably not sleeping well.
So US tech giants are facing a war of economic attrition. China's tech industry can operate at a cheaper cost, which is more sustainable. They aren't using the most advanced chips either. But here's the crazy part. The US just doubled down on their strategy of containment even after hitting a brick wall. Earlier in March, the Trump administration unveiled that TSMC, the Taiwan chip giant, will be investing in the US. The company will be pouring in an additional $100 billion into the country. Trump wants to build the most powerful AI chips in the world right here in America. And the plan is to build a total of 6 TSMC plants for chip production and a few more for packaging as well. Now, this sounds great, and on the surface, it does look like a win for the US chip industry, doesn't it? Now, needless to say, the Trump White House took a victory lap and proclaimed the win to everyone. But I think it's really premature to assume the war has been won.
And now you're seeing the power of Donald Trump's presidency because TSMC, the greatest manufacturer of chips in the world, is coming to America with a $100 billion investment. And of course, that is backed by the fact that they can come here because they can avoid paying tariffs. So the idea is come to America, build greatness in America, build for the American customers, the Apple, Nvidia, incredible manufacturing coming to America. The keys that the president has called out are coming here. They're coming here in huge size because they want to be in the greatest market in the world, and they want to avoid the tariffs that if they're not here, they'd have to suffer.
So the power of Trump and his tariff war has forced TSMC to shift more production to the US. It's not about giving carrots anymore, but using the stick to force countries to open factories here. At least Lutnick is upfront about it. But leaving that aside, does it even make sense? Is TSMC shifting chip production to the US really a good idea? Firstly, making anything in the US, especially AI chips, is horribly expensive. Just building the facility alone is a financial nightmare. Compared to a plant in Taiwan, the cost of building one in the US can be 4 or 5 times greater. And this alone places tremendous costs on any company like TSMC looking to relocate. And that's why the United States had to give a crazy amount of subsidy to TSMC during Biden's term. Now, the company planned to invest $65 billion, and to seal the deal, the US government had to give $6.6 billion in federal grants, and that's like a 10% discount to the company. In fact, the Taiwanese giant is taking a very big gamble, investing another $100 billion into more US plants. They are going into the US market knowing all the risks. Now, the founder of the company themselves called America's onshoring of chips wasteful and futile. Why? Because there's a lack of manufacturing talent and crazy high costs. Biden threw money at TSMC while Trump threatened big tariffs to get them to reshore to the US. Regardless, there's still one undeniable fact we must confront. Making chips in a US factory will be much more expensive than in a Taiwanese facility, which means TSMC can forget about exporting their US production to the world. It's better to sell directly from their base in Taiwan. So why is the Taiwanese company still forging ahead? The company has confirmed they will charge customers more for chips outside of Taiwan. So if US production costs 30% or 50% more, customers within the United States will be paying much more for the semiconductors. The chief executive already gave the US government a big warning. Now, whether Trump took it seriously or not, we have no idea, but it does give us a big hint on why Taiwan is still building plants in the US. If a customer requests to be in a certain geographical area, the customer needs to share the incremental costs. And you can bet TSMC will slap their own markup on the price of making the chips. That's the big crisis America faces. US supply chains are still horribly broken. It's why Trump wants to sign the mineral deal with Ukraine. It's also why he just used his emergency powers to boost the production of critical minerals.
An executive order to dramatically increase production of critical minerals and rare earths. It's a big thing in this country. And as you know, we're also signing agreements in various locations to unlock rare earths and minerals and lots of other things all over the world. But in particular, Ukraine, we're doing very well with regard to Ukraine and Russia. And one of the things we are doing is signing a deal very shortly.
Is reshoring production back to the US impossible? No, it isn't, but it does require Trump to solve the core issue of supply chains first. Trying to do it while reshoring chip factories will be an enormous burden to the US economy. Now, take China for example. It took them decades and trillions of dollars to build out their network, and over time, they managed to build dominance of all these critical minerals. A few countries today dominate the landscape, the production of critical resources. China, for example, has control of key inputs for making semiconductors. They control the majority of magnesium, rare earth metals, and graphite production, all of which are necessary for chip production. For other metals like cobalt, China has deep networks in the country that allows them to import huge amounts of it as well. Trump hasn't taken the time to build production from the ground up. Instead, he's threatening tariffs to bring production back. But the fundamental problem hasn't been solved yet. In fact, his tariffs are just making things worse. Copper is a critical input to make chips, but thanks to Trump's trade war, prices have flown to $10,000 a ton. Making chips is now more expensive. The cost of copper within the United States have flown to the moon. The price difference between the US and London is over $1,200. In other words, copper within the United States is at least 12% more expensive than the rest of the world. And if you have a factory making chips in the US, a key input now costs much more thanks to the tariffs. And because Trump is going to impose a 25% tariff on semiconductors in April, US companies will be forced to buy domestic chips and suffer higher prices. But if you're TSMC, the Taiwanese company, hey, it really doesn't matter if you're selling in the US. Trump is committed to push the US towards unbridled tech spending in the decade to come. In the next decade, tech giants will be spending at least $500 billion a year by the next decade. Just in 2025 alone, companies like Microsoft and Amazon will spend $370 billion on data centers and computing for AI. And that means more chips will be needed from Nvidia and more business for TSMC, who is the manufacturer of all these chips. And this is a fantastic win for the company, not so much for the US that will have to pay more. Now we have to understand TSMC really isn't losing here. Since the US is becoming a tariff or protected market, they could still make a ton of money here. US tech companies will be forced to pay more for the same chip. Now, as a chip maker, all you care about is this chart from Goldman. Over the last decade, North America has been increasing their data center supply from 9 gigawatts to 22. That is as much as the entire Asia Pacific combined. The US is determined to build the ultimate AI even after the emergence of DeepSeek. More data centers are good news for TSMC. After all, they just want to make more money. And if US tech giants wants to pay, might as well just oblige them. Sell them expensive chips and rake it in. Taiwan is also playing it smart. Officials say that they won't be sharing their most advanced technology with the US under the New Deal. They won't produce 2 nanometer chips or smaller until 2028. So the technology transfer will be limited. And by now, every country knows what the US is trying to do. The plan is to de-industrialize the world and shift production of everything to the US if possible. But US foreign policy is fickle. If Taiwan gives everything up to the US today, there's no guarantee tomorrow. Just look at how Trump is treating his direct neighbors, Mexico and Canada. And this means going forward, there will be two distinct markets in the world, especially when it comes to chips. The US will be buying their own domestically produced chips, but that production will most definitely cost more versus the rest of the world. And once China catches up, they will crush the competition and flood the world with affordable AI chips. So the clock is ticking, and because of the trade war, Beijing will continue to ramp up the pain on the US. This is the count of raw material export restrictions over the years. In 2009, there were only 3,400 of them. Today, there are over 18,000 restrictions on the export of critical inputs, and many of which are from China. In December last year, Beijing banned the export of gallium and germanium to the US. Both are critical for semiconductor production, so US supply is constricted while demand for chips is higher. Doesn't take a genius to see what this will lead to. Higher production prices for TSMC manufacturing on US soil. They have to bring in more expensive alternatives. There's no other choice. But it doesn't matter for the company. Money will still be made. It just hurts US tech companies and ultimately the US consumer. AI models will be more expensive for American users. They will have no choice but to use it. Why? Because Washington would most likely ban Chinese solutions like DeepSeek. The cost to build Skynet will be sky high. But let me know what you think. Did the US just trap the entire tech industry? And is this a good move for the company TSMC? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.